Hello everyone, this is Ninja speaking. We're doing part bootleg review and part knockoff review because this is actually both as part of this Classy Adventurer Android 17 double pack. What that entails is the front stickers there kind of show, or front printout. We're going to take a look at both a figure based off the original Figuarts 1.0 figure of Android 17, as well as one that has been modified to turn it into the Dragon Ball Super Edition, aka the Ranger 17 look. As we're looking or unboxing the package itself here, it's actually put in a surprisingly sturdy box, which is very much appreciated. Helps keep it a little more protected during its shipment from China, which is where these are all shipping out of. And while the art of the box is pretty nondescript, everything else is pretty tidy, actually, surprisingly so. Everything's held in a nice hard clamshell that's really clamped in, so it really keeps the figures from moving around a lot. When I was actually unpackaging, I was surprised to find that, much like certain official releases, at least around the waist joint there's actually a little film of plastic that needs to be removed on there to help kind of buffer and protect the joints. It's not on all the joints, but it's still appreciated, and as just a general first impression as I'm looking at the very first figure, the original 1.0 bootleg here, the joints are actually surprisingly sturdy and the figure has a good heft onto it. Everything seems to be moving, at least on the first bit, pretty well in this case. There are a few minor casting defects here and there, and immediately shortly on I notice I come into my first real issue, namely being around the elbow joints. Mostly it's supposed to be like the double elbow joints or the double hinge joints, but one of the joints are actually really locked in because of some of the casting issues that are going on here. Namely, the actual joint is a little too big for where it's been slotted in, so it's not moving particularly well. Which is unfortunate because everything else is looking pretty sturdy. Like if we're looking looking at the hips, everything on there, or just removing the plastic there. The knee joints will actually be really good on this particular figure. In this case, the little belt that has the gun holster, it takes a little bit of effort to remove, which is good because you'd actually be worried that it would normally just fall right off, but it's actually a good snug fit on there. And unfortunately, another little thing I come on pretty quickly is, in terms of the feet, there is an issue with the feet on actually both figures. Namely that the toe joints are kind of stuck in place. They're slightly off angle, I find, which means they can't really bend too well. Or at all, really. One of the feet on that particular one wouldn't work at all. And moving to the one you're probably all more curious about is the Dragon Ball Super version of it. I'm playing this at normal speed just for a point of reference, and I've also switched ahead because I actually had to re-record this part. But it's suffering from the exact same elbow joints, I'm afraid. It tends to stand out a little more because of how the arms have actually been re-sculpted, I find. But as you can kind of see, while I've been able to get it to move a little bit, because I've actually been playing a little more with it as of the time of this particular recording, it still doesn't move much. The odd choice to have the shoulder pads the exact same as the original figure there, and for this particular arm, there's actually a casting defect that prevents the figure's arm from even bending the full right angle. So that actually needs to be a little cut out there. And on the arm with the band there, I'm not sure if I have some stuck paint on mine or something like that, but it actually doesn't turn at all. Which is really unfortunate because in terms of the general display or general appearance, like the mirror logo on there is perfectly fine. The Ranger band lettering is actually really good. And there's a handful of paint issues and defects, namely around the neck. If you notice, the skin color was a little bit off and there was a little bit of a scratch here and there. But generally speaking, things are pretty good otherwise. No. We look at the kind of waist rotation, the upper torso bit has a pretty decent bend. The hips, well, the hips weren't exactly great on the original figure, so it's not a huge surprise that they don't work too well here. You have your 1.0 style articulation on the leg joints, which work just fine. They're functional. There's not a huge surprise. You kind of wish you had the more action-ready ones. Oh, but unfortunately, that's not the case. Generally, though, everything does work as well as it's supposed to. Here's a little casting defect I did notice on there. You can kind of tell where the pins are supposed to be, or where would have been in there. And unfortunately, as you can kind of see on the feet, we have the exact same issues we have on the original figure. Namely, they aren't bending much. Although it's worth noting, the shoes there are re-sculpted a bit, as well as the bottom of the jeans, which I'm going to help emphasize when I bring the original figure over in a second here. So they did make some adjustments here in order to actually help differentiate the figure. So some custom work has been done at this point, but in terms of the angles of the feet, there's not much movement going on there. Actually, the extra sculpting there kind of limits the movement of anything. Same with the gloves to a certain degree. I'm not really messing with it on camera here, but the wrist on the super version don't move too much. And speaking of sculpting or lack thereof, it's worth noting that the fists on both figures are actually entirely the same. It's just for the super version, it's just been painted over in order to have the black finish on there. Just moving back to the original figure, just proof of concept, I was playing with a little more off camera in this case, and as you can see, while I'm able to get a little more bend on there, so it's a little more of a than a right angle or 30 or 90 degree angle, it's still not moving properly because these things have unfortunately been casted a little too snug. They're slightly shrunk, it feels, compared to what it should be, as opposed to the joints, which are actually probably about the right size and curiously made out of a harder plastic than the rest of the figure. Good for keeping it durable, mind you, but unfortunately it also means it has no real give to it, so you really kind of have to push the joint in order to get it to actually turn extra. Either that or you're going to have to slightly warp the softer plastic from the rest of the limb in order to make it work. So it's just proof of concept there that just had to really push it in there in order to get it there, but it does bend. Unfortunately, it just, once again, a little more on camera there. Yeah, it's slightly softer plastic on the outside, but unfortunately the way it's been casted, no, there's going to be no bend. I'm actually going to have to physically alter the figure if I wanted to get a proper angle. And I'm not sure if it's paint stuck, but I'm going to have to do probably a similar alteration to get the shoulder with the Ranger band in order to work. Also, speaking of proof of concept, you probably haven't seen me change the hands on there, and that's because for some reason for both figures, the hands are incredibly snug on the joints, actually. That might be one of my only other chief complaints in terms of the accessories there. Also, you can kind of see another proof of concept. Yeah, you can see the knuckle marks because they're repainted once again. And while you can switch the hands around on both figures, it takes a lot of work. I find for the original figure, you have to actually be kind of be a little more worried because you have to use a lot of leverage in order to get past the wrist sleeve in order to get the figure on. It's a little easier on the super one, which is why I'm showing this one in the video here. But even then, you have to really apply a lot of pressure to pull the hands on and off. And while it does work here, it kind of doesn't fit properly either, I find. So it's just a little bit of a quirk. For a company that I quite frankly hadn't heard of prior to this release, it's not a bad first outing by any means, but the main issue I have with these figures is the joint fitting that they have there. Like, the joints themselves are nice and tight, if not a little too tight, I'd say, in certain cases, but specifically on the elbow joints there, they need to make sure these things are fitted properly so that you can actually use them properly. I mean, it's definitely going to be possible to modify them to fit, but considering that you're paying, at least in my case, it was roughly 100 Canadian, it's probably going to be a little cheaper American, like 80, 90 for this pair. That's a lot asking for something that does still need some work out of the box to really get the most out of. And I really do hope they do figure this out, because if the other part of the box is an indication, they have some more interesting figures in mind in this case, namely a visit on a Battle Damage Vegeta, Imagine Vegeta to be exact, Tournament Power 18, as well as some form of Super Saiyan 4, which has no proper release either in this case. So I do hope they figure this out. And that's all I got to say for now. Catch you all later.